I wanted to share a story that was one of those epiphany moments that I had. I was sitting with a business owner. I had just started coaching with him. It was about the probably second or third session, and we were just kind of wandering through the conversations. And sometimes I feel like, my coaching sessions should have all this structure, and we always have to achieve something, but I always have to leave room inside the coaching conversation to be able to just let the conversation go where it needs to. And for me, what I'm trying to do a lot of times, I gave you the matrix last session, but it's a little bit like a puzzle. And my wife's doing a puzzle right now. I love puzzles. I usually get addicted and I can't quit until I finish the entire puzzle. So I'm always careful about how many is it a 500 piece, 1,000 piece? I did a 2,000 piece one time, and it stole 2 weeks from me. So I'm really careful about that. But coaching is a lot in the same way. Is what's happening is you're trying to find the edge pieces first. Because if you're doing a 1,000-piece puzzle, you can't just pull the pieces out and start trying to put two together. You dump it out on the table and you find all the edge pieces. Once you have the edge pieces, then you can start put the border together. And then from the border, you can either find something significant, like my wife is doing Cinderella and Prince Charming, and the castle's in the background, so the castle's already together, Prince Charming's together. It's the same thing with a coaching session, is you're really just trying to put the puzzle together, which means that you have to be willing to sit and listen and just kind of ask questions. I was sitting with this business owner, and he was wanting to grow his business, wanting to do things different, and he shares with me, he says, I'm worried the business will close. That seems like a key puzzle piece, right? I'm worried the business will close. Because when he said that, I remembered, wait, didn't you tell me that you have 2 to 3 months worth of work? He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm not quite sure that makes sense. If you have 2 to 3 months worth of work that you can't get to, and you're worried the business is going to close, why would you feel that way? Right? Using the why principle of just asking the question. And he said, well, I don't know. That's just how I've always felt about it. I'm always worried that the business is going to close. So well, where did you get that? Is that reality, or is that, where'd you get that? He said, oh, well, I bought the business from my parents, and I've always worked for them, and that's how they always thought about it. I said, but you're 12, 13 years into the business. They always thought that way? I said, yeah, for the 10 years that they had it, they were just always worried that the business was going to close. I said, boy, that sounds like you're in survival mode. And I'm literally just picking pieces up, right? I'm not really thinking about it. That had never occurred to him. He had never realized that he was in survival mode. And then when we started unpacking that, when you're in survival mode, you don't build systems. You don't really put things in place to be able to grow a business. You're just trying to make it to tomorrow. That one thought, that one change in his mindset changed everything, right? As we started to uncover different areas of business that he could change or grow, all of a sudden we identified that he doesn't use a to-do list, right? If he would have been in survival mode, there's no reason to use a to-do list. But once he knew that, hey, the business is not going to close tomorrow, I need a to-do list. The next thing you know, he shows up he goes and gets himself an Apple iPad with the pen. He starts implementing to-do lists. He starts using a calendar for the first time. He starts changing all these different things just because we were willing to go into a conversation without an agenda and just pick up pieces of the puzzle and go. It's a little bit like that survival one was hey, this is from a different puzzle. This is from the kids puzzle that has 25 pieces. This doesn't fit here. What I wanted to do to help you as a coach, to help you to be able to have good conversations, the most important thing that we're going to need to talk about is Cartman's drama triangle. How many of you have heard of the drama triangle? Ooh, okay. So there's a couple people that have heard of this, right? And this is, there's a couple different versions of this, but it all says the same thing. I like the Disney version. I like the villain and the hero, right? Because if you think about every Disney movie that you've watched, most movies that you watch, there's a good guy and a bad guy, right? And then the poor victim at the bottom is what the story's really about, and that's what's happening. Well, if you think about drama, any type of drama that's happening at your home, in your office, with a customer, there's always a villain. There's a bad guy. There's somebody that is taking something from somebody, and they're blaming somebody else. They're criticizing. In fact, when you're on the receiving end, when you're a manager, and you get to interact with customers that aren't happy, you learn some interesting things about your business, right? Because they're really quick to tell you what you did wrong, how dumb you are. And I didn't know what that was like until I was the manager and I start getting those phone calls. Well, this drama triangle helps us to be able to understand what's happening when there's drama. And it only takes two people to be in this, right? Because what will happen is somebody, the villain, takes something or something from the victim, and now the victim is in trouble, right? The victim feels powerless. There's nothing they can do. They're in all kinds of trouble. So what do? They have to go find a hero. They have to find somebody with a cape, somebody to be able to rescue them, to be able to listen to them, to console them, because, oh, poor pitiful me, I'm in all kinds of trouble. So guess what happens when you start coaching? When you start spending time with your people and start listening to them, they're going to start to play a little bit of victim. They're going to look at situations and say, there's no way out of this. You know, I'm raising 2 teenagers in my house right now, right? We have this conversation on a daily basis. You know how many times my children come to me with a problem, and what they're looking for is dad to come in and rescue, and they're blaming somebody, right? I don't know if teachers realize that they're villains, but they get called a villain on a daily basis in my household, right? So what we want to do is we want to stay out of this triangle. We want to be able to identify it and then stay out. So we flip the triangle upside down. And what we're trying to do is get people to change their thinking and to be able to take accountability. So the question that probably happens in my household the most is, what are you going to do about that? Right? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to flip the paradigm and change the dynamics so that we're not playing the blame game. Now, here's what's interesting. If we go back to the drama triangle, you know how easy it is for this to flip, right? What happens if I'm the coach or the rescuer or the boss, and my victim employee comes to me and says, so-and-so's doing this, this, and this? And then it's my responsibility as the boss to go over and to address what that person's doing. So now I become the persecutor or the villain in that other employee's story, and I'm now the bad guy, and now that victim's going to go talk to somebody else and go to a different hero and have to be able to solve that. And that's how you get the drama triangle, and it just spins all over again. You know, most prisoners, I don't care how bad they are, where do you think they find themselves on this triangle? They don't see themselves as the villain. They see themselves as the victim. It's not their fault, right? They were just responding to what was happening. Right? We're trying to change that dynamic. So, how do we change this? That's the real question. Number one, the first thing that I want you to be able to do when this happens is you have to recognize the game. You have to be able to recognize what's happening when somebody brings you a problem. So when my 18-year-old brings me a situation and he's talking about what's going on at school, I have to be able to understand, are we in the drama triangle? There's an interesting story about Andre Agassi. Andre Agassi was an incredible tennis champion, and he played another champion named Boris Becker. And the first 3 times that Andre Agassi played Boris Becker beat him, because Boris's serves were incredible. But then when Andre was watching film, he was able to discover that Boris had a tell. That every time before Boris served, whether he was going to serve in the forecourt or where he was going to serve in the court, he would telegraph it with his tongue. And just before he'd go to throw the ball up, his tongue would go out, and it would either go in the center or to the left. And if it was to the left, he knew what to do. So when Andre discovered this, he discovered that when he plays him, he can know what's going to happen with that serve. In fact, he didn't tell Boris until years later. He kept this as a secret. And he actually, the next 8 times that they played, so it was 3-0, and the next 8 times, Andre Agassi beat him 8 times in a row because he was able to telegraph the move. He told Boris that later, and Boris said that he would actually go home and tell his wife, "It feels like Andre can read my mind." So that's what I'm trying to tell you is if we can recognize what's happening, right? This is deep psychological things. If we can understand the game that's being played, and we can see what role everybody's playing, all of a sudden I'm able to play the game differently. And that's what we're trying to do, especially like if you have teenagers, you understand this. You're trying to be ahead of them instead of getting involved in the drama and getting sucked in. Okay? So we're trying to stay out of that hero role. And what I really like to think about is leave the cape behind. Right? Take the cape off, don't wear it. Okay, so the next step, and I'm going to give you a couple different things here that you can do. The next one is don't rescue or criticize, right? So you have to stay out of villain and hero. Criticize, there's some of us that's our natural response, and I usually find this with a lot of smarter people, is they can see all the moves really quickly, and they know all the different things that should have happened, and because of that, they criticize very quickly, and they say, well, you should have done this, this, and this. If you would have done this, this would have happened. The other one is the hero. That's the rescue one. We've talked about that. The next step is to speak less and listen more, right? And this one, for some of you, it's very easy to do this when you're in a coaching situation, is actually to draw it out of us. I see Eli's laughing, right? For some of us, it's a little bit harder, right? In the beginning of coaching, I actually had to teach myself to listen and be quiet and to really just let that other person talk and let silence hang in the air. In fact, I even had, like in the beginning, I would use little gadgets to be able to help me. I'd either grab my car keys or a coin or anything that I had, and I would just play with that just to be able to help me to stay focused. It's okay, I don't have to talk, I don't have to solve, I don't have to rescue, I'm just going to listen and ask questions. Okay, so here are, I'm actually going to give you 5 of these. So encourage empowerment. This is the next thing that you can do. And encouraging empowerment is really getting them to pick up the responsibility to take ownership of the situation. And really that's what we're helping anybody in that drama triangle to do is say, hey, you're going to own this. You need to do something different. And I've got 5 questions here, 6 questions to be able to help us with this that can help you to get them to think. What do you think about this situation, right? And again, we're not jumping in. All we're simply doing is asking good questions here. What are you going to do about that? One of my favorites is like help them put them in somebody else's shoes. Like if you were them, what would you do in this situation? If you were me, what would you do about that? If this wouldn't have happened, what would you do? Or now that you know that this happened and you have the wisdom of this, what would you go back and do differently? A great book to be able to help with this, Kevin West showed me this one. This is The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. And basically what happens is everybody that comes up to you all day long, all they're trying to do is to get you to grab their monkey. And the boss is seen as the rescuer and the hero. And what you don't realize is every time that you take on their problem, your monkey's jumping on your back, right? And you're walking around with like 9 monkeys climbing on your back, and it looks awkward, it is awkward, and it's not your responsibility. So when somebody comes to you, you actually have to get them to take ownership, keep their monkey, and don't let them put their monkey on your back, right? Read that book, get that book. It's simple, it's short, it will really help you. So what we're really trying to do is get them to look in the mirror. And so my partner, Mike, one of the things that he always talks about is the mirror versus the window, right? And very apparent in this with Mr. Bean. But what happens a lot of times is that people tend to look through a window and they look at the situation and they say, oh, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And what you're really trying to do is get them to actually push the button that makes it a mirror, flip the script on them, and get them to look in there and look internally and see what's really going on. In fact, this is a good note for us as coaches, because what happens a lot of times is it's easy to see what they're doing, and we don't recognize that a lot of times we're the problem. A lot of times we don't recognize that we're actually the ones that are not taking ownership. We're actually the ones that have created a culture that is, give me your monkey, right? Let me handle that. So promote accountability. Yeah, go for it.
So you just said earlier that leadership is flipping the triangle and helping my people get their work done. And now you just said, don't let them give me their monkey.
Yeah, so what happens typically if the pyramid is at the top and the leader is up there, everybody brings their hardest stuff to the leader, and it's the leader's responsibility to get those things done. When we flip the pyramid, we're actually helping people to do better work and to be able to think on their own and to be able to solve problems. So now my responsibility comes to help you with your monkeys. So instead of just not taking the monkey and just shoving it on them, you're actually there to help them work that through and solve that problem. And it's amazing how we can create a culture where the boss is the only one that can solve a problem. The boss is the only one that can make the hard decisions, right? So we're trying to flip that to be able to help them deal with their monkey instead of just taking it on ourselves. Good question. So promote accountability, and this is something that we see in every organization that we go into, is that clarity and accountability are missing inside of organizations. Being crystal clear about what the expectation is, and then holding people accountable to it. You want to do a fun exercise? Ask your employee to write out all the different things that they're responsible for on a daily and weekly basis. Ask them to fill that out and then bring it back and go through with them, what are those responsibilities? In fact, you want to take it a step further, create a job responsibilities page that makes it really clear what they're responsible for and what they're not responsible for. Another thing that's really interesting to do here is actually have them fill out a log, and you can work with them to figure out what makes sense. With some people, it's every 15 minutes. Some people, it's half-hour blocks. But actually have them do a time log, and I've usually found that it makes sense to do at least 3 different days over maybe a 2-week period. And all you're trying to do is help them be aware of what's going on in their world. And then are we crystal clear about what the expectations are? And then can you hold them accountable to that? We have a rule at Sandler that says that you can't get mad at someone for doing something that you didn't tell them they can't do. You can't get mad at somebody for doing something that you didn't tell them they can't do. And how many times are we not crystal clear about what the boundaries are, and then once they step over that invisible boundary, they get in all kinds of trouble because we never told them that they can't do that, and we get upset about it, right? Making sure that we're clear on clarity and accountability improves coaching. Another book that we have, this one is Accountability the Sandler Way. One of our Sandler trainers up in Canada wrote this book. This is a very simple way of how to hold people accountable, and there's very practical steps inside this book that help you to be able to lay that out. Unfortunately, I don't have any available on my table back there, but if you jump onto Sandler.com, you can find this book, or it's readily available on Amazon as well. Short read, but it actually walks you through how do you hold people accountable for what you've asked them to do. By the way, all the books that we have out on the table are free. I'm hoping not to leave with any of the books, so stop by the table and get a free book. We'll help you pick one out. Robert will help you with that as well. And then lastly is offer coaching and support, right? And this is the part where you're coming alongside of them to be able to help them to learn from the lessons that they have. Do you want to try that again? What did you learn from this? I have a customer right now that They're actually, in their safety situations, every time that they have any kind of safety event, they have a meeting with the employee that it happened to. And the number one thing that they're asking them is, what did you learn from this situation? Instead of coming in with criticism and judgment, they're letting them know, hey, you're 30 years old. I'm not here to spank you. I'm here to help you figure this out. And what is it that happened from this that you can learn? Here's a few more questions that you can use to be able to help you. Do you want to try that again? How does this help you grow? I love using that question to be able to help them to think. Like, how does this situation help you grow? And then last is celebrate failure. This is one of the most important things that we can do. We don't realize how often failure gets really, really difficult. I talked about this earlier, that the fear of failure holds so many people back from taking risks. And you really should encourage people to mess up, right? That you're there to be able to help them. This is one of those invisible boundaries that if you don't tell them that they can mess up and then they mess up and you get upset at them, right? That's one of the things they're going to learn really quickly. Hey, don't do that again. So I don't know how many of you guys have heard this story before, but there was a company out in California, and it was called the Rocket Chemical Company. And they were trying to find for the aerospace industry a fluid that would help discourage rust prevention, and then to be able to displace water. So two different things they were trying to do, discourage rust and displace water. And it was a chemical company, and they were trying to do all kinds of different things. And they went through failure after failure after failure. And then they tried it 39 times, didn't work, and on their 40th time, they were able to be successful. Does anybody know what that company product's name is? Yeah. What? WD-40. WD-40, right? You've probably used it this week. We use it all the time. But that's just a great example of what failure looks like. 3M is a good company that so many of the products that we use on a daily basis was an individual product from somebody inside the company who was experimenting with something. If anybody has any sticky notes, right? 3M sticky notes, the adhesive that they use to be able to stick things, that came from an individual being able to test things on their own, failing, and then being able to come up with an adhesive that re-sticks over and over again, right? We use that today because they encourage failure inside the company. So celebrate failure. Celebrate when something messes up. Be able to encourage them and say, that's great. What are we learning from this? What can we do different? I think I have, this session's going till what time? We started at, I've got 10 more minutes, is that right? Yeah. Here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to try something a little risky. I didn't ask anybody this. I would like to do a little bit of a coaching session in person in front of everybody. Actually, Johnny, I didn't warn you this. Can I get an extra mic up here? Yeah. Do I have any brave volunteers that has a scenario or something that they're willing to be a little bit vulnerable and they're willing to come up on stage? And I'll actually coach you in front of everybody else, and we'll just use it as an example. Probably take 5, 6, 7 minutes. Won't be long. Do I have any brave volunteers? Yeah, come on up. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. We have 20. Okay, good. Yeah, come on up. Now, you look familiar, and I know you are...
Melissa Schrock. I work with the Reckoning.
We spent time in Kenya together.
I was wondering if you had been over to Kenya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so, introduce yourself.
Context.
Yeah, introduce yourself.
So my name is Melissa Schrock. I'm the agricultural director for a nonprofit called the Reckoning International. So I lived in Kenya for 8 years, and then I came home, got married, and I have a 5-month-old baby, and now I supervise a team over distance.
So we actually got to spend probably 7-8 days together in Kenya probably 2014 maybe.
I was very new on the mission field. I've learned a lot since then.
Yeah, well, good. So Melissa, it's always a little bit interesting when we do this in front of people, right? So we're just going to try and pretend that they are not here.
Okay.
And we're going to pretend that we're in somewhere comfortable. Your office, coffee shop, my office. Where's a good spot that we would be?
Sure.
Sure. All right, so let's pretend we're in my office. We're at Rise Spaces in Bunker Hill. So you're coming in here, give me kind of a synopsis on what's happened this week. Give me a rundown of where are you at this week?
Where am I at this week? Can I make it a little broader?
Yeah, go ahead.
And so the situation I am dealing with right now, my team in Kenya, I've got 4 Kenyan staff members. They lived and worked with me day in, day out for 4 or 5 years. So they caught my culture very well. The DNA was passed. I supervised 2 teams in Uganda. I never lived there. And so I'm still trying to put the pieces together on how to systematize a culture because I'm dealing with a language barrier. English is their second language. There's a cultural barrier. Things that are common sense to leadership here is not common sense over there. And then I'm dealing with a time barrier. Next week will be 8 hours behind them, and so there's only so many hours a day I can get on WhatsApp or Zoom to have those conversations with them because the day is flipped.
So this is something that right now, this is your biggest problem? Like if what you're describing here, if you had to put it on a list of like, this is the number one thing?
Yeah, well, so and then I've got 2 U.S. gals working with me. They're new, and so they're still learning my vision and my value system. So we're trying to write training materials it feels like the book of Judges where everyone does as they see fit.
In their own eyes.
In their own eyes.
Yeah.
And so we're not having catastrophes, but we need to bring everyone under the same plumb line.
Okay, so you're trying to accomplish a vision, and because everybody's going in their own direction, the vision isn't happening? The mission isn't happening? Or...
Yeah, so our mission is we work with farmer groups. So they're in a coaching role, trying to coach farmers. Mm-hmm. I'm coaching them, but none of us have ever been trained on how to coach.
Whew. Okay. So this is overwhelming?
Some days, yes.
Some days, okay. This isn't just a current situation. This has been going on for a while.
Well, it's the season situation. Because I think when I was building it, I mean, I believe that God was leading me, and we kind of I fumbled my way into things, and now we've grown enough, we've had successes, we've had failures. Okay, let's look at the puzzle, and let's begin articulating this is some standard procedures.
Yeah. So how much time are you getting with each individual person?
My managers, I've got 3 managers. Ideally, I would talk to them weekly. Sometimes it's 2 to 3 times a month.
So
I'm having one-on-one conversations with them.
You are or you're not?
I do.
So maybe once a week, maybe every other week, you're getting one-on-one time?
Yes.
And then how long is that?
An hour and a half is needed.
Okay. When you guys spend an hour and a half together and then you get back together the next time, what happens or changes in between the two?
Some of the conversations are simply troubleshooting what challenges they're facing that week. We have less problems than we used to.
Okay. So something's changed.
Yeah.
So it's improving and getting better.
So sometimes they're telling me about all of their farmer groups, And then we're trying to brainstorm how they can lead the farmer groups. I'm going to be telling them the drama triangle.
Oh, good.
Our farmers, they're always the victim. They
Yeah.
never, it's a core component of our work is to help people in poverty find out that they can take ownership. They don't have to be a victim.
Yeah.
That got us off track. Where were we?
It's good. I'm curious, like when you think about what you have to offer them, we talked earlier about learning versus leading. How much time are you spending being able to learn?
My baby is 5.5 months old, so that makes the day interesting.
Okay, congratulations. Okay.
It's fun working from home.
So I'm just curious, like, so what are you doing to be able to help yourself grow? Like,
I came to GAPCON.
you came to GAPCON, that's good. Reading any books, Bible study, YouTube, anything?
It's a hit and a miss.
Okay. And do you have a coach?
I'm looking for one.
You're looking for one, okay. So I guess the question is, in order to be able to help them grow, you're going to have to change and do things differently to be able to overcome all three of those different things you faced. What have you tried in the last month to be able to help with any of those situations?
With some of the meetings, I take an organic approach, and I'm trying to get better at like taking notes and writing down the action steps and identifying the action steps.
Good.
Because sometimes you just need to talk to your leaders without an agenda. So there's fruit to that, but I need to create a culture where we're coming up with action steps and timelines for accountability for.
Good. And when did you start doing that, taking notes?
I started at the beginning of the year, but then we fell off the train and we're trying to get back on the train.
Okay. And then I'm curious, are they taking notes as well?
I've been taking notes, but then it's on a Google Drive file, so then we're reading the same notes.
Do you think it would make a difference if they would start doing the same thing?
Maybe.
Okay. All right, good. So that could be something that we could work on, right? When you take your notes, would you say your amateur status, your maybe beginning pro, or you're like really good at it?
I'm an amateur at note taking.
Okay. So if you'd get better at that, do you think it would improve some of the situations?
I think it would help us be more intentional to address situations.
Okay, so more intentional to be able to address.
So instead of just talking about it, we would be moving to what's our plan.
Okay, all right. So what are some steps that you would need to take to be able to help you improve in that? Like, is it just a matter of like, you got to be better at it, or do you actually have to go learn something?
For note taking?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So, and that's always something that we're trying to figure out is like, is this something you got to like, you got to really push the gas on, or is this just simply, shift another gear, be more intentional, be better at that?
Probably, I think because I've chaired a lot of meetings, and so I'm externally processing. So it's really helpful when someone in the room is taking notes. And so then when I have to process and lead the conversation and take my own notes, I have to remember to slow down enough to write out what we're verbally processing.
So interesting. You're saying that when you're in the situation, you're improving by taking notes, but it's actually hindering you.
Yes.
Interesting. So what should we do about that? Like, how do we change that, or what do we do with that dynamic?
I like your idea of asking the other person to also take notes.
Okay. How long are your conversations?
1 hour.
1 hour. So you should have time to be able to work on notes together.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So if this was an actual coaching session, I'd say, should we make that an action step?
Yes.
Okay. good. All right. So let's pause, right? So I'm curious, I'm just going to throw this back out to you. What are you learning here? I'm curious, if you were in my situation, what would you have said different? Because what happens is when you're listening to somebody, there's always so many different ways that we can take a conversation. Based on my questions, we're actually directing the entire conversation. So whatever I bring up is going to take somebody in a certain direction. So I'm either going to ask more questions about what she said, or I'm going to bring up something new. I'm curious what you're learning. Yeah, go ahead.
I picked up that you're asking kind of leading questions and questions that encourage the other person to think about something specifically without even really stating that topic. Like they're simply leading questions to lead them in a certain direction.
Yeah, good. So just getting them to think. It takes a lot of curiosity. It takes patience, right? Because we're just trying to wade through. We have to not just get to the answer really quickly. And that has a lot to do with how much time we have, right? If I've got an hour, we've got time to expand on something. If I've got 15 minutes, that's a completely different conversation. Good. Go ahead. I'm helping them come up with their own solution, right? And it's interesting if all of a sudden I make the decision that she needs to take notes and I'm pushing on that and that other part doesn't come out, that she's actually an external processor. Is that how you said that? Like, that's a big deal. I would actually want to ask a lot more questions about that to understand what she knows there so that I can help her with that. So it's either we have to get better at external processing and we have to do that in a better way and then combine it with note-taking, because what we're really wondering now is the person on the other end, are they an external processor, right? Do they need time beforehand to prepare for the meeting, and then they're going to go through the meeting and then they're going to give you feedback afterwards? Or are they the type of person that it's just going to come out of their mouth and you're actually helping them process by having the conversation? Good. So one more. Yeah.
Trying to create ownership of the process for themselves.
Yeah.
You're trying to get them to own it.
Yeah. Because I'm just there to, and this is the monkey situation that you were asking about, right? Your monkey is you've got 3 big things that you're dealing, or 3 hurdles that you're dealing with. And we're trying to get you to actually take ownership and realize that you're the solution for the problem. Good. I'm curious, Melissa, as you're sitting there, what are you learning by being coached?
To take notes.
To take notes? It's good. Okay. Thank you. Let's give Melissa a hand. There's so many different ways that you can coach. If you think about, if we put 10 different people up here, that conversation is going to go in a lot of different ways. And there's not one right way to coach. It's more important that you're showing up and you're there and you're willing to be open and vulnerable, to listen, to care about them, to share concern, and then to be able to help them work through what they're carrying. Right? It helps if you understand what solutions look like, right? So when I'm in a coaching situation and I don't know the answers, that's when I have to go find answers afterwards. In a lot of my coaching situations, what happens is they'll do or say something that confuses me. Their response to the situation doesn't equal what I think they should be doing, right? That's when I turn to assessments. Right? How many of you are familiar with DISC? Right? And that's a pretty good. What I turn to is their DISC assessment to be able to understand how are they wired? What's going on the inside of them? Why are they responding the way they're responding? And it's my responsibility to know what's going on inside their world so that I can help direct them. When I was back at my family business, I did this constantly with my direct reports. Something would happen that drove me crazy, right? They were responding in a way I didn't like, and so then I would pull their DISC assessment out and I'd study it, right? And I'm looking at all the different things in there and I'm going, oh, okay, I was missing that. Good example would be when I was 20-something and I'm living at home and I had bought a personal computer. This was back, many years ago when it was hard to get PCs, and I had spent the money. I think I spent $800, got a PC, and then my brother wanted to install a game on it. And he was younger than me, was still in high school, and I said, okay, not a problem. And every day that I would come home from work, I'd get off work at 4:30. I'd come home. First thing I wanted to do was check my email and jump on my computer, and my younger brother would be there. Now, if you know my younger brother, you can give him a hard time about this. But I'd come home and say, Nick, I want to use my computer. And he wouldn't even look at me. And then he wouldn't get off my computer. Well, we had many little spats about my computer, right? Because I'm like, it's my computer. I paid for it. I want to get on it. But he would just never respond. So I'd get mad. We'd get in fights. I'd go back and apologize later. It just kept happening over and over again. Then I started thinking about it. What can I do differently here to get a different outcome? And I started realizing Nick doesn't like confrontation. So I decided, what if I'd come home and I'd try something different? What's a non-confrontational way to be able to help him through that? I thought, okay, next time I come home, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say, hey, Nick, that's my computer. I want to use it. I'll be back in 10 minutes. You better be off this thing. He never said a word. He didn't acknowledge me. He was like 14 at the time. And I walk out of the room, come back 10 minutes later, no Nick, right? I realized really quickly that when you confront Nick, he does not like that, and he's always going to just stand still, right? Understanding your people and how to coach them, how to help them work through situations is really trying to learn more things about people. The more you learn about people, the easier everything else gets. In fact, a lot of us get it wrong. We think we're in the pizza business or seed business or real estate or different things, and we don't realize that we're actually in the people business. I had a businessman that I was working with one time, and he had a company that was very service-oriented, and it was typically seasonal. And he discovered that he was really good at the service business, but every time he'd hire somebody, they'd last about 2 seasons, and then they'd move on. And he discovered really quickly he'd rather do the service himself than to have to deal with the people and what it took to be able to bring people in for a year or two and then for them to leave, right? And he made a good decision. He just moved back into the service industry and he just ran it himself because it was more difficult to lead those people than it was to do the work. And if you're really going to make a difference for your people, you have to figure them out, spend time with them, and be able to lead them in such a way that they're going to grow. So in conclusion here, I wanted to just remind you again, this is our goal setting series, right? We do this every year. This is a great example. You can grab this in Akron at our headquarters, or this is available on Zoom, but you have access to all 3 of the sessions, the goal setting, vision boarding, and cookbook. The goal setting one is long. We've got it set for 3 hours. And we'll actually walk you through setting goals in 8 different categories to be able to help you with that. And then the vision boarding, giving you a visual of that. So you can sign up at the table back there. And then the next thing that I had available as well is a business leaders workshop. And I'm offering this for business leaders in regards to sales. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, spend an hour with us. It'll be November 15th at Rise Spaces. And this is complimentary to business owners. But this is just an opportunity. We'll talk about why salespeople succeed and why they fail. And we'll give you 58 minutes of our best sales content to be able to help you understand what can you do with the changing economy to be able to help your salespeople to succeed and to grow at a better rate. But come up to me afterwards. I'm available back at the table. Be glad to help you. We've got one more session coming up after lunch. That session, Robert Perry, my partner, is going to be doing, and we're going to give 23 action steps in regards to coaching and give you more tips of how you can grow and improve as a coach. So, thank you.